D.B. Cooper, The Man Who Got Away. Written by Stephen J. Pickering. Read by Robert Bell Jones. This is a Listen and Live audio production.
Prologue. The Jump. The wind was a living thing. It tore at his clothes, roared in his ears, clawed at the edges of his resolve. The aluminum skin of the Boeing 727 thrummed beneath his feet, the open airstair rattling in the cold November night. Somewhere far above, lightning split the black sky, revealing for a heartbeat the dark quilt of the Pacific Northwest below. Forests, rivers, and mountains, all blurred by rain. The bag at his side felt impossibly heavy. 40 pounds of cash, tightly wrapped, its edges pressing through the canvas like bricks. He'd cinched it to his waist with a length of rope taken from one of the parachutes, tying it twice, then twice again. If it slipped loose in the fall, it would be over before it began. He didn't look back toward the cabin. He didn't need to. The cockpit door was shut, the crew huddled forward under strict instructions. No one would try to stop him now. He had made sure of that. Cooper bent his knees slightly, feeling the slipstream surge upward from the airstair. It smelled of rain and jet fuel, tasted of iron and cold. He had timed the jump in his head, calculating from the airspeed, the low altitude, the heading. The ground was somewhere down there, an invisible, hostile promise. A voice in his head, calm and steady, asked the same question it had asked for weeks. "Are you sure you can do this?" Another voice, colder, sharper, answered, "You've already done it. You just have to finish." He tightened his grip on the handrail one last time, glancing toward the horizon. There was nothing to see, no lights, no cities, no witnesses, just darkness. He let go. For a split second, he was weightless. Then the wind punched him, yanking his tie upward, snapping the strap of the money bag tight across his ribs. The stairwell vanished above him, the 727 shrinking into a silver speck swallowed by clouds. The roar in his ears became all there was, drowning out thought, memory, and fear. The forest rushed up to meet him, and then the night swallowed everything. Chapter 1. Thanksgiving Eve. The rain had been falling since morning, a thin, steady drizzle that turned the streets of Portland slick and black under the November sky. Inside the terminal of Portland International Airport, travelers hurried through the ticketing lines, shoulders hunched against the damp chill that followed them indoors. The air smelled faintly of coffee, cigarette smoke, and wet wool. He moved through the crowd with an unhurried stride, the kind of walk that belonged to someone who didn't mind being noticed, but didn't invite conversation either. His suit was dark, pressed, the lapels narrow. A black raincoat draped neatly over one arm. In his right hand, a slim, hard-sided briefcase. His shoes, polished but not new, tapped evenly against the tile floor. At the counter, he set the briefcase gently on the surface and slid a $20 bill toward the Northwest Orient Airlines clerk. "One ticket to Seattle," he said. His voice was even, low. The clerk didn't look up until she'd taken the bill, fingers moving over the register keys. "Name?" "Dan Cooper." No hesitation. The syllables fell as though he'd been saying them his whole life. The clerk printed his boarding pass, tore it free, and passed it across the counter. Cooper accepted it with a polite nod, slipping it into the inside pocket of his jacket. Behind the tinted lenses of his sunglasses, his gaze swept the terminal, not nervously but deliberately, like someone mentally cataloging exits, sightlines, patterns. It was 2 p.m., Flight 305 to Seattle was scheduled to depart in less than an hour. In the departure lounge, he sat alone, briefcase on his lap, legs crossed. From the corner of his eye, he watched passengers trickle in, businessmen in gray suits, a young mother with a toddler, a pair of college students with battered duffel bags. He lit a Raleigh cigarette, the smoke curling upward into the pale light. The intercom crackled. Northwest Orient Airlines, Flight 305, now boarding at Gate 5. He rose smoothly, joining the short line. No carry-on beyond the briefcase. As he stepped through the jetway, the hum of the aircraft grew louder, the deep, throaty rumble of the Boeing 727's engines warming on the tarmac. A flight attendant with short blonde hair and a neat uniform greeted him at the door. "Welcome aboard, sir." "Afternoon," Cooper replied, flashing a faint smile. His seat was 18C, aisle, toward the rear of the cabin. He stowed nothing, keeping the briefcase at his feet. As the last passengers settled in, he leaned back, folded his hands in his lap, and closed his eyes. To anyone watching, he could have been just another tired traveler on a short hop up the coast. The rain-streaked windows showed only the blur of runway lights as the plane began its taxi. Cooper sat motionless, sunglasses still in place, even in the dim cabin light. The engines roared, the pressure in the cabin shifted, and the aircraft lifted smoothly into the gray afternoon sky. The seatbelt sign chimed off. A flight attendant moved down the aisle with a practiced smile, taking drink orders. Cooper's voice was steady when she reached him. "Bourbon and soda," he said. "Of course." She made a note and moved on. The drink arrived moments later, amber in a clear plastic cup. He thanked her, set it carefully on the tray table, and reached into his jacket pocket. When his hand emerged, it held a plain white envelope. He waited until the blonde attendant, Florence Schaffner, passed by again, then extended it toward her. She accepted it absent-mindedly, tucking it into her uniform pocket without a glance. Cooper leaned toward her, his tone soft but unmistakable. "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." The world inside Flight 305 was about to change forever. Chapter 2. I Have a Bomb. Florence Schaffner froze mid-step. She looked down at the man in 18C, dark suit, dark glasses, calm expression, and then to the envelope in her hand. She pulled it open. The handwriting was neat, printed in block letters. "Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase. I want you to sit next to me." A slow pulse began to thud in her ears. She glanced at his face, expecting some twitch of nervousness, some giveaway. But there was nothing, only a faint, measured smile. He gestured toward the empty seat beside him. "Please," he said, as if offering her a spot at a card table. Florence slid into the seat, clutching the note. "You're serious?" He placed the briefcase on his knees, snapped it open. Inside were 4 red cylinders wired to a large battery pack. The wires were taped neatly, bundled with electrical connectors. Not haphazard like a movie prop. It looked real, too real. He shut the case gently. "I want $200,000 in cash," he said evenly, as if ordering a sandwich. "In 20s, 4 parachutes, 2 main, 2 reserve, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle to top us off for a trip south." Florence tried to keep her voice steady. "I'll have to tell the captain." "Of course." He leaned back in his seat, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at his mouth. "Take your time." The word spreads forward. In the cockpit, Florence relayed the message to Captain William Scott, co-pilot First Officer William Ratazak, and Flight Engineer H.E. Anderson. The reaction was immediate. Eyes widened, shoulders stiffened. The captain picked up the radio, contacting air traffic control and relaying the situation to Northwest Orient headquarters. Within minutes, the FBI's Seattle field office was on the line. They were already scrambling. Back in the cabin, Cooper was as composed as ever. He had removed his sunglasses for a moment, rubbing the bridge of his nose, revealing sharp, steady eyes. When he put them back on, the reflection of the cabin lights hid them once again. Florence returned, notebook in hand, jotting down details for the ground. Cooper was precise. Altitude, speed, the exact denominations of the money. He even specified that the parachutes should be civilian style, not military rigs. Small talk in the sky. As the plane banked gently over Puget Sound, Cooper spoke with her in an almost conversational tone. He asked where she was from, whether she enjoyed flying. He remarked that she should get a meal when they landed. When she glanced nervously toward the other passengers, he said quietly, "Don't worry. They'll all be fine. I'm not here to hurt anyone." At one point, he even offered to pay for his bourbon and soda, sliding a crumpled bill toward her. She declined. The crew told the passengers there was a minor mechanical issue and that they'd be delayed in Seattle. Outside the windows, the fading daylight gave way to darkness. The rain streaked harder across the glass. On the ground, FBI agents rushed to gather the money, recording each serial number. A local skydiving school was contacted for parachutes. At the airport, police cordoned off the arrival gate. Inside Flight 305, the mood was strangely calm, at least for those unaware of the truth. A businessman snored in his seat. The mother with the toddler soothed her child with a storybook. Only the crew and Cooper knew the reality. The plane was now part of a chess game being played at 10,000 feet. Florence glanced at her watch. They'd been in the air far longer than the short hop to Seattle required. The delay was stretching, the circles over the Sound widening. She brought Cooper another drink. "You look nervous," he said, studying her face. "I am nervous," she admitted. "Good. It means you'll stay sharp." There was no menace in his tone, just a strange, disarming calm. When she left his side again, he took a drag from his cigarette, exhaling slowly, watching the smoke curl toward the overhead light. Outside, the lights of Seattle shimmered in the distance. He knew the money was ready. The question now was whether the ground would play along and whether the sky would hold for his jump. Chapter 3. Negotiations in the Sky. The rain was heavier now, streaking sideways against the cabin windows as Flight 305 traced another slow arc over Puget Sound. Below, the lights of Seattle glimmered like a scattered handful of coins. The captain's voice, calm but clipped, came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're just waiting on some paperwork before we can land. Thank you for your patience." No one questioned it. The passengers shifted in their seats, checked watches, glanced out into the darkness. In the cockpit, the radio buzzed with terse exchanges between Captain Scott, Seattle Air Traffic Control, and FBI negotiators on the ground. The ransom money had been gathered, 10,000 $20 bills, each serial number recorded, packed neatly into a canvas bank bag. The parachutes had been acquired from a local skydiving school, hastily driven to the airport. Cooper sat in 18C, legs crossed, cigarette balanced between two fingers. The smoke curled upward, vanishing into the hum of recycled air. Florence Schaffner sat beside him, notebook in hand, scribbling down any detail the FBI might need. "How's it looking?" he asked. "They're getting everything together," she replied. "They'd better," Cooper said, but there was no edge in his voice, just certainty. At 5:46 p.m., the cockpit received confirmation. The money and parachutes were ready. Cooper nodded when Florence relayed the message. "Tell the captain to land," he said. The 727 descended through thick cloud, rain hammering the fuselage. The runway lights at Seattle-Tacoma International emerged from the mist, glowing against the wet tarmac. The wheels hit with a muted thud, reverse thrusters roaring, slowing the jet to a crawl. Cooper leaned toward Florence. "Remember, no one comes near this plane except the fuel truck and the person bringing the goods. If anyone else tries, we're back in the air." The passengers had been told they were free to disembark once the mechanical issue was resolved. As the stairway rolled into place, they filed out slowly, some glancing back at the man in 18C, most too distracted by the delay to notice him. The cabin was suddenly quiet, the empty rows gleaming under the overhead lights. Only Cooper, the crew, and the hum of the engines remained. Through the rain-streaked window, Florence saw a man in a trench coat approaching the plane, carrying a large bag. He stepped inside, placed the ransom on a nearby seat, and left without a word. Moments later, another man brought in the parachutes, 2 primary, 2 reserve, and set them beside the money. Cooper inspected everything with quick, precise movements. He rifled through the bundles of cash, feeling their weight, then checked each parachute harness. One of the reserve chutes was a training model, non-functional, but he said nothing. Outside, the fuel truck pulled alongside, hoses snaking toward the wing. Cooper stood at the rear of the cabin, watching through the rain-streaked glass. The crew in the cockpit waited for his next move. He spoke without turning. "We're going to Mexico City. Flaps at 15 degrees, gear down, altitude no more than 10,000 feet, airspeed around 200 knots, and leave the rear stair down." The cockpit relayed his instructions to air traffic control. Controllers protested. The plane would burn fuel too quickly at that configuration. But Cooper was immovable. He agreed to a refueling stop in Reno, Nevada, if necessary. The fuel truck rolled away. The engines surged. The rain outside was now a shimmering sheet in the taxiway lights. As they lifted into the night again, the cabin felt heavier somehow, quieter, emptier, like a stage before the final act. Cooper gathered the cash into a single canvas bag, looping rope through the handles and tying it around his waist. He worked with slow, deliberate movements, as if he'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. One parachute he set aside, the other he spread across 2 empty seats, inspecting the cords. Florence lingered nearby, torn between fear and curiosity. "Why 4 parachutes?" she asked quietly. Cooper smiled faintly. "To make them think I might take a hostage." He adjusted the straps. "People are more careful when lives are in their hands." Outside, the black void of the Pacific Northwest night stretched in every direction. Somewhere ahead lay Reno. Somewhere below, a wilderness vast enough to hide a man forever. And somewhere between the two, D.B. Cooper would vanish. Chapter 4. The Drop. The hum of the engines was lower now, steady, almost hypnotic. Flight 305 cruised at 10,000 feet, heading south into a wall of November darkness. The cabin lights were dimmed at Cooper's request. Outside, the rain slanted sideways across the windows, driven by wind. Somewhere far above, lightning flared, momentarily illuminating the clouds.
Tina Mucklow,
the only flight attendant remaining on board, sat near the front of the cabin, as Cooper had instructed. The rest of the crew remained in the cockpit, sealed off. The rear of the plane was his domain now. Preparations. He laid the cash bag across the seat, cinched the rope around his waist again, and tugged until the knots bit into the fabric of his suit. The parachute came next, one of the civilian rigs. He shrugged it on, tightening each strap with practiced efficiency. From the cockpit, Captain Scott's voice came over the intercom. "Everything all right back there, Mr. Cooper?" "Just fine," Cooper replied. "Stay on course." The airstair control lever was tucked away at the rear bulkhead. Cooper gripped it, glanced once toward the cockpit door, and pulled. A loud metallic groan filled the cabin. The stair began to lower into the slipstream, the roar of rushing air flooding in. In the cockpit, a warning light blinked. Rear stair deployed. The crew exchanged glances. They knew what was coming. Cooper's voice came over the intercom once more, calm and clear. "No one comes back here." Then nothing. The stair clanged and rattled in the wind. Rain sprayed upward in fine mist as the plane cut through the storm. The smell of wet air and jet fuel filled the rear cabin. Cooper stepped onto the top of the stair, bracing against the railing. The world below was invisible. Only the occasional flash of lightning revealed jagged outlines of hills and endless forest. The wind tore at his tie, snapped the parachute cords against his shoulders. He crouched, testing the weight of the bag at his side. The rope dug into his ribs. In his mind, there was no turning back. The time for planning was over. He bent his knees, gripped the railing, and stepped into the void. The air hit him like a punch, flipping him sideways. The roar was absolute. No up, no down, only the violent pull of gravity. Rain stung his face like needles. Somewhere above, the 727 roared on into the night, its lights swallowed by cloud. Cooper's hands found the ripcord. A sharp tug. A jolt as the chute deployed, jerking him upright. The sudden silence after the roar was disorienting. Only the soft rush of wind and the hiss of rain remained. Below him, a vast black sea of treetops waited. He hit the ground hard, knees buckling in the mud. The parachute collapsed beside him, a white shape against the darkness. For a long moment he didn't move, listening. No voices, no engines, just the relentless patter of rain on leaves. He cut the chute free, gathered the cash bag, and stumbled toward the cover of the trees. Every step was heavy, the ground soft and treacherous. Somewhere far away, a dog barked. The storm swallowed him whole. Chapter 5. Aftermath. When the Boeing 727 rolled to a stop on the wet tarmac at Reno-Tahoe International Airport, the ground crew kept their distance. They'd been warned. The hijacker might still be aboard. The rear airstair hung open like a broken limb, rainwater dripping onto the pavement below. Inside, the cabin was cold and eerily empty, seats glistening faintly under the dim lights. Captain William Scott and First Officer William Rattizak emerged from the cockpit cautiously, scanning the rows. No briefcase, no cash bag, no parachute, no Cooper. Floodlights bathed the plane in white glare. FBI agents in trench coats and state troopers with shotguns climbed the forward stairs, sweeping the interior row by row. Their boots squeaked against the damp carpet. An agent crouched by the rear stair, fingers tracing the wet metal. "It's been down for a while," he muttered. "Rain pooled here." "Which means," another asked, "means he jumped. Question is, where?" In the airport operations room, maps of Washington, Oregon, and Northern California covered the walls. Controllers replayed radar tracks, cross-referencing with the flight crew's timeline. But turbulence, low altitude, and the storm made pinpointing the jump location nearly impossible. "It could be anywhere in this corridor," one agent said, circling a swath of land on the map. "Dense forest, rivers, no roads for miles in places. He might be dead already." "Or he's sitting by a fire right now counting 200 grand, another replied. By dawn, search teams were mobilized. Helicopters scoured the tree canopy, their rotors chopping the mist. Ground teams pushed through dripping underbrush, boots sinking in mud. Dogs sniffed along logging roads and riverbanks. Every fallen branch looked like a parachute strap. Every glint of white fabric made hearts jump, only to reveal a scrap of bark or a patch of snow. The weather turned the effort into a slog. Freezing rain soaked through gear. Visibility was poor. The rivers were swollen and fast, carrying away anything that fell in. Back at Seattle-Tacoma, the FBI interviewed every passenger who had been on Flight 305. Most had seen little, just a quiet man in sunglasses, sitting near the back, occasionally smoking. Some remembered the black suit, others the thin black tie with a tie clip. One recalled the faint smell of cologne. The crew gave more detail. He was polite, never raised his voice, knew enough about aircraft to dictate precise flight configurations, spoke without a noticeable accent. The serial numbers of the ransom bills were distributed to banks, casinos, and law enforcement across the country. Any of those $20 bills showing up in circulation would be flagged immediately. Weeks passed. Nothing. The parachutes? Gone. The briefcase bomb? Never recovered. The man? Vanished. For the first time in decades of airline hijackings, the FBI faced a total absence of evidence. The case they labeled Norjack, Northwest hijacking, had just begun, and it would haunt investigators for decades. Chapter 6. The Hunt. The Pacific Northwest winter was merciless. Rain, sleet, and fog conspired to erase any trace of the man who had vanished into the night. Yet the FBI pressed forward, determined to find him, or at least his remains. Agents fanned out across Washington and Oregon, knocking on doors in rural towns, interviewing loggers, farmers, and hunters. They asked the same questions over and over. Had anyone seen parachutes? Strange debris? A man limping or soaking wet, carrying a sack? Most shook their heads. A few offered stories. A lone figure seen at dawn near a river, a tent deep in the woods. Every lead was pursued, and everyone crumbled under scrutiny. The sketch, drawn from Stewardess Mucklow's memory, was plastered across newspapers. A middle-aged white man, square jaw, slicked-back hair, dark sunglasses. The nation now knew the name D.B. Cooper, the result of a reporter's error that stuck. Tips flooded in. A former paratrooper who lived off-grid in Idaho. A bitter ex-Northwest Orient employee in Seattle. A drifter with a military duffel bag last seen heading toward the Cascades. Some suspects were eliminated quickly. Others lingered for years in the FBI's files, their names surfacing again and again as the case grew colder. 2 of the 4 parachutes Cooper requested had been returned by the crew after the jump, untouched. But the 2 he took, the main chute and a reserve, were gone. An experienced jumper would know. One reserve was a dummy, stitched shut for training purposes. If Cooper grabbed that one by mistake, his odds of survival would have plummeted. But no torn canopy or body turned up, leaving the question open. Did he choose correctly? Or did his body sink into the wilderness, carried away by the river's winter current? In early 1972, a hunter in the dense forest near Ariel, Washington, found shredded white fabric tangled in a tree. Hopes soared until lab tests revealed it was a piece of nylon from a weather balloon. This would become a pattern, each promising clue, each flash of media frenzy, collapsing into nothing. Despite the FBI circulating the serial numbers nationwide, not a single ransom bill surfaced in circulation. Cooper, if alive, wasn't careless. He hadn't bought cars, houses, or even groceries with the marked bills. Some agents believed this meant he died in the jump. Others thought it pointed to a man with immense patience, one willing to wait years before touching the money. The longer the manhunt stretched on without results, the more Cooper became a folk hero. In bars from Portland to Spokane, men in their 40s joked about being DB friends, teased each other about mysterious weekend trips. Country songs mentioned him. Bumper stickers read, "DB Cooper for President." What began as a crime was slowly transforming into a myth. By the spring of 1972, the official search had scaled back. The FBI would keep the case open for decades, but the urgency faded. Still, every agent who touched the Norjack file carried the same lingering frustration. How could a man simply vanish, parachute, cash, and all, without leaving the faintest trace? Chapter 7. Time and Silence. Years passed. Seasons cycled in the Pacific Northwest. The forests Cooper had vanished into grew taller, the rivers deeper and swifter. Winter storms scoured the ground. Snow melted into mud. The land reclaimed itself. And yet the story lingered. February 1980. 9 years after that fateful jump, a young boy named Brian Ingram dug in the sand along the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington. His small hands scraped through soil, uncovering 3 tightly bound bundles of cash. When the bills were unwrapped, their serial numbers were a perfect match to the ransom money Cooper had stolen. Suddenly, the myth had a tangible footprint. A shred of reality emerged from the decades-long fog. The FBI retrieved the bills, examined them, and quickly realized the mystery had deepened. The location was far downstream from any plausible landing zone. How did the money get there? Had Cooper survived the jump and buried it himself? Or had it been carried by the river's slow current, a silent witness to fate? Over the years, theories multiplied like shadows in the trees. Survival and escape. Cooper, a skilled parachutist with military experience, had landed safely, buried the money, and disappeared into the vast Northwest. He may have assumed a new identity, blending into the population. Death in the wilderness. The harsh weather, darkness, and treacherous terrain had claimed him. The money Ingram found was a fragment, deposited as the river shifted debris over the years. Accomplices and hidden plans. Some proposed Cooper had a partner on the ground, someone waiting with a hideout, perhaps even helping to stash the ransom. Each theory had its adherents and detractors, but no definitive evidence ever emerged. Suspects come and go. Through the decades, names continued to surface. Richard Floyd McCoy, a former Army helicopter pilot, had executed a nearly identical hijacking months later, but was quickly eliminated. Robert Rackstraw, a paratrooper with a murky past, drew public speculation and amateur investigation, but never conclusive proof. Kenneth Christensen, a former Northwest Orient flight attendant with parachuting experience, was investigated decades later, again without resolution. Each name kept the story alive in the media and in public imagination. Every new theory, whether plausible or outlandish, added layers to the legend. By July 2016, after 45 years, the FBI officially closed the D.B. Cooper investigation. Their statement was simple. No new credible evidence had emerged, and resources could no longer be justified. The files were released to the public. Hundreds of pages, sketches, witness statements, and photographs offered a treasure trove for amateur detectives, historians, and dreamers alike. Even so, Cooper's true fate remains unknown. Did he survive? Did he die that night, his body claimed by the wilderness? Or did he simply walk into the shadows, a phantom with $200,000 strapped to his chest? The legend persists. D.B. Cooper is no longer just a man, he is an idea, a symbol of audacity, mystery, and the possibility of vanishing from the world without a trace. He has inspired books, songs, television specials, and documentaries. He has become a fixture in American folklore, a cautionary tale, and a source of endless fascination. Perhaps the true secret is not where he went or whether he survived. Perhaps the secret is in the way a single act of courage or recklessness captured the imagination of generations, proving that sometimes the greatest heist is the one that escapes history entirely. Epilogue: The Man Who Got Away. Somewhere in the forests of the Pacific Northwest, the wind still whispers through the pines, carrying stories of a man who vanished into the night. D.B. Cooper is, in many ways, a ghost, a figure who exists more in the imagination than in any physical record, a man who walked onto a plane as a stranger and stepped off into myth. Decades after that rainy Thanksgiving night in 1971, no one knows with certainty what became of him. His fate remains an enigma. Perhaps he survived the fall, adapted to a new life, and lived out his days quietly, far from fame or fear. Perhaps the forest claimed him immediately, the money he carried a silent artifact, washed downstream and scattered. The unanswered questions are part of what keeps his story alive. Was he meticulous or lucky? Brave or reckless? A criminal, a folk hero, or simply a man who seized a singular opportunity and disappeared? In libraries, online forums, and living rooms across America, theories are debated endlessly. Amateur detectives hunt for clues, writers craft novels, songs memorialize him, and tourists walk the riverbanks where the ransom money once surfaced. And yet, for all the speculation and investigation, Cooper's legend endures precisely because of what he accomplished: the ultimate vanishing act. He turned an ordinary airplane ride into a national obsession, a puzzle that may never be solved. In the end, perhaps that is the point. D.B. Cooper did more than steal money. He stole certainty, leaving behind a story that refuses to end. He became a mirror for curiosity, audacity, and the irresistible lure of the unknown. And somewhere, out there, in a shadowed valley or a quiet town, far from the world's notice, a man may still be living the freedom he bought, a freedom paid for with $200,000, a parachute, and the audacity to step into legend. The Man Who Got Away remains, in the truest sense, timeless.
D.B. Cooper, The Man Who Got Away. Written by Stephen J. Pickering. Read by Robert Bell Jones. This is a Listen and Live audio production.